Chapter 2 of Finn the Wolfhound by Alec John Dawson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2 In the Beginning. It was little that Tara the Wolfhound cared about the lack of space, so that she could stretch her great length along a hearthrug, with her long bearded muzzle resting on her friend's slippers, and gaze at him while he sat at his work, through the forest of overhanging eyebrows which screened her soft brown eyes. And in any case, the next 4 months of her life, after the happy meeting at the show which restored her to her old friend, were too full of changing happenings and variety of scene and occupation to leave time for much consideration about the size of quarters and matters of that like. For one thing, it was within a few days of the show that Tara was taken on a 2 days' trip to a farm in Oxfordshire, where she renewed her old acquaintance with one of the greatest aristocrats of her race, Champion Dermot Ashore, the father of those great young hounds she had given to the world during her life with the Master. The children whose subsequently earned champion honours reflected glory upon herself as the most famous living mother of her breed, though not the most famous show dog. The qualities which win the greatest honour in the show ring are not always the qualities which make for famous motherhood. As a show hound merely, Tara might have been beaten by dams of her race who had not half her splendid width of flank and chest and general massiveness, though they might have a shade more than her height and raciness. After that, something considerable seemed to happen pretty well every day. The Master spoke laughingly of the spring madness that was as quicksilver to his heels, and of great profit to furniture removers. He laughed a good deal in those early spring days, and took Tara and the mistress of the kennels with him on quite a number of journeys from Victoria railway station. Tara heard much talk of Sussex Downs, and when she came to scamper over them, found herself in thorough agreement with every sort of joyous encomium she heard passed upon them. Then there came a day of extraordinary confusion at the little flat, when men with aprons stamped about and turned furniture upside down, and made foolish remarks about Tara as she sat beside the writing-table, gravely watching them. That night Tara slept in a loose box in the stable of a country inn, and in the early morning went out for a glorious run on the downs with the Master, who seemed to have grown younger since they left London. Within a very few days from this time, Tara and her friends had settled down comfortably in a new home. An oddly shaped little house it was, full of unexpected angles and doors, and having a garden and orchard which straggled up the lower slope of one of the downs. It had a stable, too, of a modest sort, and rather poky, but the coach-house was admirable, light, airy, facing south-east, and having a new concrete floor, which the Master helped to lay with his own hands. The back half of this coach-house consisted of a slightly raised wooden dais, a very pleasant place for a wolfhound to lie when spring sunshine was flooding the coach-house. But Tara did not spend much of her time there, for between the stabling and the house there was a big wooden structure with a tiled roof, large as a good-sized barn, but with an entrance like an ordinary house-door, and comfortably match-boarded inside, like a wooden house. A pleasant old villager, who was doing some work in the garden, referred to this place as the old parish room; but the Master made it his own den, lined one of its sides with books and pictures of dogs and men, and fields and kennels. He had his big writing-table established there, with a sufficiency of chairs, a few rugs upon the 40 feet length of floor, and an old couch upon one side, manufactured by himself with the aid of an ancient spring mattress, a few blocks of wood, a big possum-skin rug, which some friend had sent him from Australia, and a variety of cushions. The actual house, for all its rambling shape, was small, and possibly this was why the Master chose to utilize this outside space as his den, and to fix a big stove in it for heating. Here, too, at one end and just beyond the big writing table, was a raised wooden dais or bed, like that in the coach-house, a good 6 feet square, with sides to it, perhaps 6 inches high. Tara watched the making of this dais, and saw the master cover its floor with a kind of sawdust that had a strong, pleasant smell, and then nail down a tightly stretched piece of old carpet over that, making altogether, as she thought, a very excellent bed. And as such Tara used it by night, but in the daytime she usually preferred to stretch herself beside the writing-table, or on the rug by the door, where the sunshine formed a pool of light and warmth on a fine morning. Here it was that Tara took her meals, a dish of milk in the morning, with a little bread or biscuit, and the real meal of the day, the dinner, which the mistress of the kennels always prepared with her own hands, so that it was full of delightful surprises and variety, though everything in it had the moisture and flavour of meat in the evening. At about this time it was that Tara noticed a kind of white sediment, quite inoffensive and not at all bad to eat, in her morning milk dish, and this she welcomed, because in some dim way it was connected in her mind with happy old days that came before her parting with the master, when she had lived with him in a place not unlike this clean, fragrant downland, which stretched now far as one could see on either hand, outside the garden and the orchard, all about this new home which Tara found so good. At certain times and in certain circumstances some breeders of big hounds believe in mixing precipitated phosphate of lime with ordinary food, for the sake of its bone-forming properties. To describe one half the many delightful incidents and occupations which made the days pass quickly for Tara now would require a volume, but as time went the great hound tended to become less active. There were any number of rabbits on the downs beyond the orchard, and at first, in her before-breakfast ramble with the master, Tara used greatly to enjoy running down one or two of these. But after a little time the master seemed to make a point of discouraging this, even to the extent of resting a hand lightly upon Tara's collar as she walked beside him, and gradually she herself lost inclination for the sport, except where greatly tempted, as by a rabbit's jumping suddenly for its burrow close beside her. In the afternoon, when Tara generally went out with the mistress of the kennels for a good long round, she wore a lead on her collar now, so that even sudden inspirations to galloping were checked in the bud, and a sedate gait was maintained always. Without troubling her head to think much about it, Tara had a generally contented feeling that these precautions were wise and good. The same prudent feeling influenced her in the matter of meals now. Though she frequently felt that she would much rather be without her morning milk, she always lapped it carefully up, and conscientiously swabbed the dish bright and dry with her great red tongue. She could not have explained, even to herself, just why she did these things, but subconscious understandings and foreknowledge play a large part in a Wolfhound's life, and so does subconscious memory and the inherited thing we call instinct. Without considering a prehistoric ancestry, there were 1,500 years of lineal Irish Wolfhound ancestry behind Tara. Her own family dated back so far. For instance, in the year 391, 7 centuries before the Conqueror landed in England, there was a Roman consul whose name was Quintus Aurelius Symmachus. In a letter that he wrote to his brother Flavianus, he said, "In order to win the favour of the Roman people for our quaestor, you have been a generous and diligent provider of novel contributions to our solemn shows and games, as is proved by your gift of 7 Irish hounds. All Rome viewed them with wonder, and fancied they must have been brought hither in iron cages. For such a gift I tender you the greatest possible thanks." That these Irish Wolfhounds of 1,500 years ago were big and fierce and brave and strong, you may know from the conviction of the Roman people that they must have been brought in iron cages. Also, friend Symmachus writes in other letters of the boars and lions and the armed Saxons provided to do battle with the Irish Wolfhounds. Also, he shows the quaintest sort of annoyance over the fact that some 29 of these perverse Saxons who were obtained to fight the Irish Wolfhounds cut their throats on the night before the games, their own throats, I mean, and so spoiled sport for the holiday-loving Romans. In the 1st century of our era, Mesroidia, the king of the Leinstermen, had an Irish Wolfhound which was so mighty in battle that it was said to defend the whole province and to fill all Ireland with its fame. For this hound 6,000 cows, besides other property, were offered by the king of Connaught, and about the same price was offered by the king of Ulster. Irish Wolfhounds fought regularly in battle through the early centuries of our era, and fearsome warriors they were. Right down to the period of a couple of centuries ago, a leash of Irish Wolfhounds was considered a fitting and acceptable present for one monarch or lord to offer to another king or great noble, while from the earliest times down to the day of Buffon, and in our own time, Stonehenge, the naturalists have written of the Irish Wolfhound as the greatest, that is, finest and tallest of all dogs. But it was not alone in such matters as refraining from violent exercise, and the taking of food whether inclined for it or not, that a sort of prescience guided beautiful Tara at this time in her new home beside the Sussex Downs. There came a morning when, as she strolled about the strip of shrubbery and orchard which lay between the stabling and the house, it occurred to her that it would be a good thing to dig a hole somewhere in the ground, the sort of hole or cave into which a great hound like herself could creep for shelter if need be, a cave in which she could live for a while. Tara did not know that the Master was watching her at this time, but he was, and there was a sympathetic and understanding sort of smile on his face when Tara forced her way in between two large shrubs and began excavating. The earth was soft and moist there, and Tara's powerful forefeet scooped it out in regular shovelfuls, for her hind feet to scatter in an earthly rain behind her. She made a cavern as big as herself, and then divided the rest of the day between the beautiful big dais in the coach-house, all dry and sweet and clean, and her fragrant carpeted great bed in the old parish room. Lying there at her ease, with one eye on the Master's shoulder, where it showed round the side of his high-topped writing-table, Tara wondered vaguely why she had troubled to dig that hole in the wet earth. But the Master knew all about it, though he could not claim to have 1,500 years of Wolfhound ancestry behind him, and he seemed quite satisfied. On the following day Tara gravely inspected the hole she had dug, and decided that it was not altogether good. So she went and dug another in a rather more secluded spot, and then came back and dozed comfortably at the Master's feet while he wrote. Later on in the day she strolled round the whole premises, and inspected carefully the various places in which, during the past week or so, she had buried large bones. The next day found Tara extremely restless and rather unhappy. She had an uncomfortable feeling that she had forgotten some important matter which required attention. In her effort to recall what the thing could be that she had neglected, she dug 2 or 3 more holes, and finally, a thing she had never thought of doing before, took one of the Master's slippers, always a singularly dear and comforting piece of property to Tara, and buried it about 2 feet deep in a little ditch. She felt vaguely ashamed about this, though she had no idea that the Master had watched her taking the slipper away, but she could not bring herself to return the slipper because of the hazy need she felt for laying up treasure and taking every sort of precaution against a rainy day. During the afternoon Tara's general uneasiness increased. She felt thoroughly uncomfortable and worried, convinced that she had forgotten some really important matter, and disinclined either to go out or to stay in. 50 times the Master opened and closed doors to suit her changing whims, until poor Tara felt quite ashamed of herself, though still quite unable to settle down. As a sort of savoury after dinner, the Master gave her some silky, warm olive oil. An odd thing to take, Tara thought, but upon the whole pleasing and comforting. Then suddenly, and as she woke from a doze of about 10 seconds' duration, Tara decided that it would be a good thing to tear a hole in the middle of the tight-stretched old carpet on her big bed. She got to work at once, pleased to think that she had remembered this little matter in good time, and was distinctly disappointed when the Master came and sat beside her on the edge of the bed, and playfully held her paws, after gently lowering her into a lying position. Still, it was good to have him sit there and chat, as he did for some little time, rubbing the backs of her ears, and generally being sociable. He was the only human creature, with the exception of the mistress of the kennels, who had ever really chatted with Tara. While Tara was gradually forgetting her desire to tear the bed-covering, a cart stopped outside the house, and a whiff, the hint of an odour, drifted in through the open door of the den, and caused the great hound's nose to wrinkle ominously. Next moment she gave a savage bark, deep, threatening, and sonorous, and sprang to her feet. She was not quite sure what ailed her, but she was conscious of an access of great anger, of passionate hostility. After soothing her, the Master carefully locked the door of the den, and then went round through the gateway leading to the front of the house, and took delivery of a large hamper from the station-carrier. Then the mistress of the kennels came and sat in the Master's den for perhaps half an hour, while he was busy down at the coach-house with the hamper and a lantern and a dish of dog's dinner of milky, sloppy sort. That was a strange, eventful night in the den. All the country round was silent as the grave, and the air of the June night was soft and sweet as the petals of wild roses. The mistress of the kennels was persuaded into going early to bed, but the Master sat behind his big table, writing beneath a carefully shaded lamp, and rising quietly every now and again to peer over the top of the high table in the direction of the big bed in the shadow where Tara lay. Many things happened in the meantime, but it was just after the clock in the tower of the village church had struck the hour of 1 that the Master was thrilled by a cry from his beloved Tara, the 5th he had heard during the past 3½ hours. He leaned forward on his elbows, waiting and listening. Tara had never heard of duty or self-control. She was a pure child of nature. But the moment of that cry of hers was the only moment she allowed for self-consideration, or the play of her own inclinations. In the next moment she was busying herself with the most exquisite delicacy and precision over the care of her latest offspring, the last late-comer in her new family of 5. In that next instant, too, a weak, bleating little cry, a voice that was not at all like Tara's, smote pleasantly upon the ears of the Master, where he waited, peering watchfully from beside the deep-shaded lamp on his table. It was then, just after the Master heard that little bleating cry, which told of new life in the world, that Tara, with infinite care and precaution, lowered her great bulk upon the bed in a coil (she had been standing), the centre of which was occupied by 4 glossy Irish Wolfhound puppies, who had arrived respectively at 10, 11, 12, and 12:30 that night. The 4, then blindly grovelling over the carpeted bed, were now perfectly sheltered in the still heaving hollow of their mother's flank. These comparatively world-worn pups had not arranged themselves conveniently in a cluster to receive their loving mother's caress. On the contrary, they were all groping in different directions at the moment in which Tara's pain-racked body was lowered to rest, and to shelter them. But while yet that great body hung over them in the act of descending, it had twisted and curved into the required lines, and the soft muzzle had thrust this puppy that way, and the other another way, the mother's soft filmy eyes missing nothing before her or behind. 1 inch of miscalculation, and the life had been crushed out of one of those tiny creatures. But pain brought no miscalculation for Tara. One quick movement of her head satisfied the mother that her 4 firstborn were safe and well disposed. Immediately then, with never a thought of rest, her nose thrust the newcomer into position between her forepaws, and she proceeded to administer the life-giving and stimulating tongue-wash. Over and over the little shapeless grey form was turned, cheeping and bleating, until every crevice of its soft anatomy had come under the vivifying sweep of 6 inches of scarlet tongue, warm and tenderly rough. Then the mother's sensitive nose thrust and coaxed the little creature to its nesting place under her flank, where 3 sisters and a brother already nosed complainingly among milk-swollen dugs, quite indifferent to the coming of an addition to their number, and desiring they knew not what, desiring it lustily. Then, and not till then, did the beautiful mother of these new-born descendants of an ancient race permit herself to draw a long breath of relief and lower her massive head upon her forepaws. A moment later, and a desire which overcame weariness impelled Tara to part her hot jaws and glance in the direction of the shaded lamp. No least movement of hers escaped the master, and in the moment of her glance he came forward with a dish of fresh cold water in his hand. The mother lapped slowly, weakly, gratefully, thanking whatever gods she knew, and the friend whose hand and eye were so ready, for the balm of water. The man moved very gently and deftly before her, and no anxiety came into her brown eyes when he leaned forward to examine the now resting litter at her flank. But it had gone hardly, one fancied, with the stranger, or even with the casual acquaintance who should have approached too inquisitively the little family. "There, there, pet. All right, my Tara girl," murmured the man, as he stepped back softly to his table, to return a moment later with a dish of warm milk and water, which the slightly rested mother drank with forethoughtful eagerness, though the effort necessary for lapping in that constrained position, and without disturbing the little ones beside her, was far from pleasant, and far enough from personal inclination. 10 minutes later the dam very gently changed her position, all idea of rest having left her now, and proceeded systematically to lick first her own swollen dugs, and then the little featureless faces of her offspring, with many small encouraging muzzle thrusts and undulations of her sinuous frame; while the master, ready to give assistance if that were required, but too knowledgeable in these matters to wish to hasten nature or botch the delicate handiwork of the mother, stood in the shadow of his big table, watching and waiting. Within another few minutes the 5 pups were immersed in the most important affair of life, from their point of view, and with wriggling tails and tiny heaving flanks, with impatient out-thrust pink forefeet, wet faces, and gaping little jaws, were nursing in a row like clockwork. The mother turned a proud filmy eye in the direction of her friend the master, and allowed her massive head to fall on its side, her whole great form outstretched to reap the benefit of a few more minutes of needed repose. "Good girl," whispered the master, and stepping backward he turned yet lower than it was the wick of his shaded lamp. "Good! Excellent! 5's a very good number. I should have been sorry to see a big litter for dear old Tara, and anyhow that last one, the grey, is about equal to any 2 I ever saw, an immense whelp, dog for sure, and a giant at that." The Master lay down to sleep presently on the couch with the 'possum skin rug, and before many hours of the June daylight had passed he had verified his impressions of that last born son of Tara's as a grey brindle, and the biggest whelp of its age that he had ever seen. For purposes of registration in the books of the Kennel Club, the Debrett of the dog world, the late comer was forthwith christened by the Mistress of the Kennels under the name of Finn, in honour of the memory of the 4th century warrior Finn, son of Cumhal, lord of 300 Irish Wolfhounds, whose prowess in battle and in the chase were sung by Oisin in 2,272 separate verses. Finn was chief of King Cormac's household and master of his hounds, for the most honoured counsellor that the ancient kings of Ireland had were masters of the hounds always. And this was the way of the Irish Wolfhound Finn's entry into the world, at the end of the first hour of a June day, in the Master's den beside the Sussex Down. You may see the embalmed body of his great mother's sire, Champion O'Leary, if you care to look for it, in the Natural History Museum in Kensington. Woefully shorn of his imposing beard and shaggy eyebrows, it is true, but yet only less magnificent in death than he was always in life. Her mother was the dam of the hound who marches to-day at the head of his master's Irish Guards. Between them, the sire and dam of Finn would have scaled 300 pounds, while either could easily have stretched to a height above the shoulders of a 6-foot man. Finn rested easily in the palm of the Master's right hand when christened by the Mistress of the Kennels, for he was little bigger than a week-old kitten. But he was none the less Finn, the lineal descendant of King Cormac's battle-hounds of 1,500 years ago, and it was said he had the makings of the biggest wolfhound ever bred. End of Chapter 2.